Hello, my name is Parker.
And my name is Ned.
And this is the Force Unlimited, yet another Star Wars Unlimited podcast. This is episode number 20. Good on us. We're recording August 4th. It was just GenCon. We were not there. So I hope you have enjoyed listening to all your other podcasts about GenCon. I will say it was really funny. Charmer from Ice Cave Radio's wife put out a bounty for photos of their child in the wild. Charmer took his kid, and it was always funny to see these photos of these tables of people playing Star Wars Unlimited at Gen Con, and it was just 90% content creation. It's just there's Unplayables, there's Golden Dice, there's TD Tata and KOTD and the Garbage Rollers, and it was like it felt very snake eating its own tail, where like we're going to go to Gen Con to participate as fans, and the people going who are fans are the people who are creating fans by generating hype. I mean, content creators are ostensibly super fans. But it was funny just to see an entire row and be like, I actually recognize everybody in there. There's no randos competing here. Maybe that's just me being too, I'd probably recognize people who aren't content creators at a certain level just by their presence on the Discord. Ned, tell dear listener about the match we just played.
It was not a good match. So Parker was on Han 2 Blue, and
Yes.
I was on Kira Yellow. I'm trying out some of the more meta E-decks, but putting my own spin on them because I am an idiot like that. And so I love to Kira's like a soft control leader. Why don't I try yellow Kira? Because I like a bunch of the yellow cards. And like first game, I just have the standard control problem of you fall behind early and then you're constantly trying to catch up, and then hero mid-range has these big haymakers that come out at the top, and you're
even earlier with Han 2.
Oh yeah.
So right, I mean, I just think about the fact that like Power of the Dark Side, if you're not doing damage based removal, like if you're not doing red based removal but you're doing blue based removal, then on a certain level the 2 damage that Han 2 does to his unit is irrelevant. Right?
Yeah,
because
completely.
You're still having to spend a takedown. I mean, I guess that puts them within takedown range, but you're still spending a Fell the Dragon or a Rival's Fall or a Power of the Dark Side on the card. But now you have to spend bigger removal.
A turn early.
Turn earlier. Yeah. And so, I don't think my list is quite as refined as others, but as you will describe probably for game 3, I'm trying to lean all the way into the Force package purely for Force Throw. Like that's, I want you to have cards.
I didn't really see the Force Throw. I did see a lot of the pillage. The fact that pillage can effectively discard the top of the deck if you take initiative is huge against like a control player that's desperately trying to top deck their way out of something. To go into a little bit more detail, game 2 I was able to get on. Once you get your legs under you as control, you've got your legs under you, and you can.
I didn't have any hand disruption in game 2, so I was just like, it was like turn 6, and I was like, you're drawing a full hand. I've had no Poe, no pillage, no Force Throw. I'm out. Wrap this up.
And then game 3 was the same as game 1, where I'm able to contest a little bit on like the very first turn, and then very quickly Han 2 is just able to, at least against the Kira yellow build that I have, which we can make arguments about whether or not it's optimal. Probably not, but I think say. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I think I'm nervous because I enjoyed the game. Hand disruption definitely feels fun. It's not for the person on the receiving end. But my concern is that Han 2 it'll probably end up being competitive, but at a speed, at an aggro level that I'm less interested in. An aggro tempo deck is not my jam. I want to play tempo into mid-range. And so if the competitive, to play, if you grind down to get fast enough to just go fast as opposed to fast with hand disruption, I'll have to find something else. But I don't know if I enjoyed the games, but the games felt good. I mean, I enjoy all SWU.
Yeah. One other thing that I will mention before we move on to our proper topics, and that is the Smuggle arc of hype, right? Like, I remember when Smuggle was previewed and everybody was like, wow, Smuggle using the resource row. What a clever mechanic. I'm really excited about all the stuff I'm going to be able to smuggle. And then, you see more and more of the cards and you're like, wow, I'm paying 5 for a 4/3. I'm really not very excited about this. And then you hit the trough where like the set is released and people are trying to run like smuggle heavy decks, and it just kind of, again, this is your meta and
Early
your mileage
days.
may vary, but it smuggle largely does not feel competitive outside of specifically the DJ Han interaction to sit on your opponent.
Hard disagree, Ned. I am going to, I think, for the first in this show, not say that I respectfully disagree, but just say that you're wrong. I think, I think there are, because I ran a lot of Smuggle. I actually had a respect, and all of my decks actually currently run Smuggle. I think you're right, mostly that a lot of the Smuggle is not good.
Right.
But I think that part of that stems from the fact that if Smuggle is an evergreen mechanic, if you imagine Smuggle as a keyword, but they had to put a ton of Smuggle in initially, because if there's only like 5 Smuggle cards, like it couldn't be like Grit in set 1,
right,
because it's a secret based keyword. If you only have 5 Smuggle cards, then it defeats the purpose. You peek at it, you know that it exists. So they really had to flood the set, but you can't flood the set with like long-term staples of that keyword. But I think you'll constantly see, I think Smuggle is going to end up being like any keyword in that you'll have 3. I mean, you smuggled out First Light.
Yeah, so that's where I was going to get, is that like the height parabola, like you dip down into the basement and then you're coming up and you're like, okay, the point of Smuggle is not to play on curve. If you are smuggling out cards on curve, you are doing something very wrong. The point of Smuggle is that when you're in a late game, like top deck war scenario, and you're playing a mid-rangey to controlling deck, or even like an aggro deck that's barely trying to like grasp for those last couple of shreds of damage, Smuggle acts as a hand extension, so you are less likely to draw dead, right? Like, so you can set yourself up for success. Yeah.
And I think about the fact that, like, so I had, 3 Cassian, and there was a number of games where you were walking through lines, and I had like 4 or 5. I had 4 or 5 lines. I had 2 Cassians in my resource row. I got rid of one to Wrecker, so it's like right there. There's an automatic 3 damage. Yeah. And again, when you're in that I need reach moment, when you're just looking for answers, 3 for 3/5 is great, but 5 for a 3/5 that can attack on the turn it comes into play. I mean, people pay that. People pay 3 for a 3/4 that can attack the turn it comes into play in Millennium Falcon, and that has an upkeep. So ground arena +1 health, but no upkeep, totally feels reasonable.
Yeah,
not great the turn on your on turn 4. Not great when you have exactly 5 resources, but when you're at 9, 10 resources and you're just looking for answers in the game. I run Timely. Timely's absolutely,
Timely is
and this is something that I come back to, because Timely's great and Tech is great. And one of the things that I think, I like First Light.
Yep.
One of the things that I think
Bazine is just a beautiful card.
How much does Bazine smuggle?
She smuggles for 4, and so I have frequently
and she pays 2 to come in. Yeah. So the point I was making about is that with regards to Timely, Timely, Tech, and First Light, is anytime the card costs less than 2. So Timely only costs 1 extra. Tech only costs 1 extra over the face value. And I feel like that, like you're never wanting to pay 2, but paying 1 extra, like Timely, I almost never play Timely out of hand. Like Timely Intervention for 2 resources to bring it out of the Smuggle was fantastic.
Right, because when you're smuggling, all of the cards effectively say draw a card. I feel like we're going into like a mini segment here talking about the smuggle keyword, but like
Uh, I'm down.
it's
I'm down.
yeah, it's
And I think that's the
really
problem. It's
good.
why
Yeah,
Hondo's not great is because I mean, maybe he will one day be,
right.
but I don't think Hondo's great because Hondo wants you to be smuggling like really early.
Yeah,
Like nobody wants to smuggle on their first turn. Like
no.
nobody, whereas like Tarkin can put an experience token on an Imperial that costs 1. Like
Mm-hmm.
Tarkin can drop a Death Star Stormtrooper and turn it into a 4/2 turn 1, right? Like that's an option. Whereas like nobody wants. What are you smuggling in on turn 1? Like you can smuggle in a timely and play nothing, right? So Hondo, like you're not kicking in most smuggle cards until later. But and then shout out like Timely's great,
Yeah.
Cassian's great. I think there's enough, but then the real kind of is for heroism is tech,
Yes.
because tech does.
Must
I
answer.
think tech would
Yeah.
be fine. Oh no, he's not even a trick. Forget the trick. Like forget all
No, no,
the
no, no, no.
DJ
I'm just no,
shenanigans.
no, no, no. Putting that to one side, like tech is just a huge card advantage engine, right? Like
Right.
it's yeah,
Like you can play
yeah,
tech and then suddenly knowing that tech
yeah.
exists in your deck allows you to be more aggressive in those
In your resourcing
resourcing your
decisions,
answers.
yeah,
But and again, but the real key for tech is that he can be resourced and he
yeah.
resources and he comes out for only 1 more. And I
Mm-hmm.
think so again, you don't want to have a card that just sits in your hand. Like it's always that weird feeling when you draw one of your big answers like 4 turns
Too
before
early,
you can
right?
use it, and you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you're on resource turn 4, you draw Luke or
I feel like
Avenger,
most of the
like
time you have to resource it, right? Like sometimes you can play a card down, but in a close enough matchup, you cannot play a card down, and so
you
you
basically
have to.
have to already
Yeah,
be on curve. And so
yeah,
tech is your answer to things that you
yes,
feel comfortable resourcing.
yeah.
So you're right that I think a lot of the smuggle just isn't worth it, but that's true of like a lot of the cards, period. And I don't think you
Sure.
can throw out the mechanic. I mean, how many
No,
cards
I
were grit based in set 1, whereas I bet we get to set 5 and operating on the assumption that that smuggle is evergreen. I think increasingly you'll see like here's my answers, here's my second hand for more and more decks. I could be wrong.
no, I will be interested. I was, again, this is Ned being victim to the hype cycle, but I remember looking at Lando and going, "Boy, I think that I can do some really fun stuff with that." And then the set coming out and was no, no. In fact, I mean, you sort of can, but you not realistically. Yeah,
I was never high on Lando. He
I
never
like
did much for me.
Lando. I like Lando. I will say it right now. I played Lando Calrissian in set 1 as just a duder. I play I've tried Lando Calrissian in set 2. I like Billy D. Williams.
No, and that's fair. That's
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah.
I yeah, I run Wrecker begrudgingly, dealing with
Yeah.
destroying my own stuff. But tune in here in mid Twilight, assuming Smuggle is evergreen,
Yeah.
and let's find out what percentage of decks are running a Smuggle card,
Or
right?
or like
And
the average number of smuggle cards in a deck, right? Like
sure, right.
yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that's also an interesting number, but
Yeah.
also just the number that are running at least one is
Mhm.
a compelling question as that mechanic settles, because I bet that the average number of Smuggle, and more importantly, the number of decks running Smuggle, will be higher than pretty much any other keyword, right?
I
Like
would largely agree with that outside of maybe Sentinel. I feel like Sentinel
maybe
is
Sentinel's
yeah.
pretty omnipresent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but it'll be up there. I think Smuggle will be
Yeah.
every deck will have 1 or 2 Smuggles. The same cannot be said for Saboteur. The
No,
same can't be
Gauntlet is
said for
thrown.
Shielded, right?
Yeah.
Like yeah.
I
But
want to do
anyways,
that. I want to do that math. Yeah. No, I'm excited to do that math.
we have to wait till we confirm that it's evergreen, but I mean we could
Yeah.
do that math for now. Let's
Yeah.
tune in, dear listener, in like 2 weeks. We'll find out.
Yeah.
But all right. So our first segment is we're seeing some events. We're starting to see
Yes.
early Shadows events,
Yes.
and I am sad.
What? Tell me
And
more, Parker. What's making you sad?
so early tier lists for leaders, and even recent tier lists, current, if you will, tier lists,
Mm-hmm.
have Ray as a solid leader,
Mm-hmm.
possibly one of the I think arguably one of the two best new leaders.
Mm-hmm.
I don't consider Kira to be a new leader.
I mean,
She's a new
tell
leader in
me.
Shadows, but like Kira's just for the most part slots into a Krennic shell, right? Like Kira's the
Yeah.
reverse Boba 1, where like the question with Boba 1 is why aren't you, with every other villain yellow leader is
Yeah.
why aren't you running Boba, right? Like you could run Cad. Cad's fine, but
I like Cad.
wouldn't you be happier in a Boba shell? As a
I would
reminder,
not, sir, sir.
As a reminder, Cad Bane is the new Shadows leader. He is a 2/8, and whenever you play an Underworld card, he deals one damage to a unit of your opponent's choice. So
He has also raid 2, and then on the flip side, the ability upgrades to 2 damage of to a unit of your opponent's choice.
thank you for reminding me. Yes, in case you
Yes.
weren't familiar with Cad Bane. So the like this, I feel like Kira's the reverse problem on that.
Right.
The Kira is, yeah, Iden was very competitive in set one.
Yeah.
Krennic was reasonably competitive in set one. There are exceptions, but for the most part, Kira doesn't like create a new deck that didn't
No.
exist in set one. She slots into existing blue-green
Yep.
villain
Blue.
control,
Yes.
maybe double blue villain control, and does what they were doing, but because she
Yep.
has a more exciting flip.
Yeah. No. I mean,
Instead of
like
doing
she has like a semi board wipe flip, like a flip that lets you, particularly in green setup, like play her uh overwhelming bombardment, and yeah, clean
yeah,
things up.
no,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but the two I feel like leaders who are most poised to be Shadows competitive are Han 2 and Ray.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was excited for Ray. I was excited for Vader Green. I thought there was a lot of fun new ramp toys, and we're not seeing them, right?
Right.
And the one that actually makes me sadder. I mean, I'm a little bit sad about Ray, but I kind of get the idea that new set people, especially in an event, you're not going to take weird new stuff. Like
Mm-hmm.
you want to make Hunter work, God bless you, but you're gonna do that at your locals. You're not gonna try to make that work for the first time at like GenCon at a 1K. But like Vader Green's in his, so Ray, I get you're not
Mm-hmm.
trying to make Ray work. People are grinding, refining the lines, but Vader Green's an established archetype who got I think more new toys than anybody but Boba Yellow. And yet no no presence, basically no presence for Vader at all, much less Vader Green. So let's talk about that, Ned. You have gone through so many more TCG set releases
Mm-hmm.
than I have. Even if I follow SWU until the end of SWU, it's an order of magnitude less than what you've gone through. So
Been wizened.
why
So
are my favorite decks that are high leaders who are high on tier lists not showing up on lists, on like a
so
tournament
you've
result
got
lists?
number one, you've got the like people are hesitant to try out a new thing. But putting aside psychology, let's talk about the idea of topography, right? And going back to that metaphor of we have this. Let's imagine that we have this weird surface, and we're all just like little marbles that are falling on this surface. And when you are a marble, you kind of move around, and each marble that you're dropping is like a deck that you're trying, right? Like, and then when you're refining the deck, right, like you're moving your marble a little bit. You see like, okay, if I do a little bit this way, if I do a little bit this way, and you're trying to search up these hills. So this is
You're
a
looking for the
technique.
highest point,
You're looking for the highest, you're trying to find the highest point, and there's not like a perfect
highest
highest
being
point.
most winningest.
Yes, yeah. So this technique is called gradient ascent in the machine learning space. And to kind of refine this, though, it's
But just so
really
we're clear,
hard.
that's not a weird math thing. That's just like
No.
a metaphor that stands for people, how people look for best
Yeah.
things.
No, exactly. Is that like, and when a new set comes out, the topography is changed, right? Like you have all these new hills that potentially exist, right? But if we compare there are two things that can happen, right? When a new set comes in, number one is that there are elements of this new set that are obvious and very, very strong, right? And if these are obvious and very, very strong, then like these sometimes you term like decks that build themselves, right? Where like let's look at Cad Bane or Ro Bo whatever the
Bo
Mandalorian type
Katan.
of leader, Bo Katan. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right, like Cad Bane and Bo Katan, you look at them, there are packages of cards that are kind of like, oh, I obviously include these cards to do this thing, right? And when you do these, when you try these out, like as somebody who has done some grinding with Cad Bane, um, if you don't see early success in the existing topography, it is hard to justify keeping like searching around that hill, right? And the hill might end up being higher, but you have to find the path up that hill. Whereas if you go back to like Boba Yellow, right? Like the Boba Yellow hill, people know that Boba Yellow hill pretty well. But one of the things that makes CCGs, TCGs so fascinating and why people love them and why people love like competitive meta environments is because the heights of the hills aren't fixed, right? Like let's imagine that I'm playing in like and this is why we talk about the meta, right? Like the meta is the sea in which these hills are defined, right? And so as the meta shifts, then the heights of the hills shift, right? And where the peaks of the hills are shifts. And this is something that I feel like is really important when you're building a new set is that you want enough obvious stuff to be good enough that people who are dropping marbles are gravitating towards enough of this new stuff, this exciting new stuff that the shapes of the hills are changing and it's going to tend to make people less sure about the heights of the hills. But I would say that like the none of the really obvious new decks have panned out for either power level reasons or for difficulty of play pattern reasons or for just like cards aren't quite there yet. So an example of this that I really think of, a lot of people were going in and they were looking at Kylo Ren, right, as a aggro leader in villainy, where we haven't really seen good aggro decks in villainy. And unfortunately, like the meta has very well adapted to Sabine, right? And Kylo Ren is not attacking on a different enough axis to enable it to escape the kind of people adapted to deal with Sabine, right?
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. No. But
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, does the villainy package not present a different enough like pool of cards that you can't adapt in the same way? I mean, I guess you're just missing things. You don't have Fachibi. You
yeah.
don't have.
I mean, like your reach equivalent. To go back to Kylo when we were talking about in the preview show. The idea behind Kylo, as far as I see it, is that you're discarding. Your reach is a top end, right? Like your reach is that you're running Vader Green and Palp and maybe even Darth Maul, and you're running these cards, and you are Palpatine's return is enabling you to use them for a top end in the way that Sabine sometimes struggles with. So you're discarding cards early, and then you're reloading with Palpatine's return to try and get the last couple of points across the finish line. So that's like one way to build it. Another way to build it is even more like low to the ground aggro-y, where you've got Migs Mayfield, you've got Kylo's Tie Silencer. There we go. To enable you to pitch cards and still see value from them, and you can just burn out your whole hand by turn 4, right? And
Yeah.
maybe get there enough. But neither of those packages has seen, again, people are working. Just because it's not working now doesn't mean that it's never going to work. But for right now, it's not giving enough obvious returns that it's not rewarding the people who are kind of digging in those mines, right?
Okay, right. So one thing I feel like we haven't seen
Yeah.
a lot of is, so you say there are, a new set drops, the topography changes. You're looking
Yeah.
for new hills.
Yes.
Not that people seek these out, but I have to assume that down the road in Star Wars Unlimited, because I don't think we've seen it in Shadows, is new valleys in this topography,
Yes.
right? Where a deck that was really great can't adapt to. It's not even a meta question, right? It's just the new environment. This deck assumes a thing that wasn't true that is now true, or vice versa. Like trying to assume, with Boba, right? Like, there's resources that you don't want to ready, right? Like that you want to leave exhausted, and so now suddenly Boba Yellow doesn't work because you don't want to ready resources.
Or maybe just like there's a card that's printed that's like let's pretend, right? Let's pretend that there was like what are the defining characteristics of Boba Yellow? We've got the really powerful flip turn on 5, right? So if there was a card that you could use to kind of, for want of a better term, like multi-target damage, or some kind of like a fart in the pool on 5 that you could use to really slow things down on 5 or on
just
4.
A unit your opponent's leader costs 1 more.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Then Boba loses a lot of its luster, right? Like if you're playing Vader on 8 versus playing Boba on 6, the relative.
Those are 2 totally different.
Right.
And especially for Boba Yellow, right? Because Vader almost universally either runs ramp or is waiting for the late game anyway.
Right.
Okay, right. So we haven't seen any of those new valleys in Shadows, I don't think.
So that's true, but not, right? So I would say that one common valley experience is with control. So why control decks tend to have a little bit of a hard time early in a new set, and the reason for that is when you are building an aggro or a linear deck, right? Like aggro decks are a subset of linear decks, but other examples of linear decks are like typal decks, right? Or something where essentially you are caring about your side of the board primarily, and you are not caring about your opponent's side of the board, which seems weird for an aggro deck, but fundamentally an aggro deck is about trying to count to 20 as fast as possible, right? And your
30,
opponent's
but yes.
30, yes, sorry. You're counting to 30 as fast as possible, and your opponent's units are there to stop you, right? And so if you could play a situation in which your opponent's units didn't exist, your deck would still be completely functional, right? Whereas with control, if your opponent's units don't exist, a good 60% of your deck is not valid, right?
Which is why control decks, control versus control matchups take forever, because you're both just looking for the few cards that are relevant.
Yes. And, in control, so yeah, I mean, like this is an obvious valley. I would say that we didn't see this as much. Like we're seeing Kira decks put up pretty good results, at least a couple of them. And
but again, I think that's just because Kira is just slotting into an existing shell. Like she's running. I mean, you look at most Kira set lists, and they're 80% old Krennic set lists. 80% old Iden set lists, and not you've got Snoke and a couple new bottom end cards, and congratulations, you've improved, but you'd run those in Krennic as well anyway, right? Those are just refinements of the existing blue villainy package,
right?
Okay. So I mean, but is it just that so aggro fast established decks, you kind of know how quickly you want to get to where you want to be by resource 4 or 5.
Yes.
And so you can quickly find out, does this deck continue to get me where I want to go by resource 4 or 5?
Yeah.
And the refinement happens in the edges, but you're immediately aware. Control, you need to know what other people are playing. It relies on
Mm-hmm.
you, kind of that second order level thinking where you're,
Right.
what does my opponent have? What does my opponent think I have? Level play because
Mm-hmm.
so okay. One thing I was having a conversation about when I was actually at Cardboard Diamonds,
Yeah.
the new, I mean new to me,
Mm-hmm.
LGS uh, last week. I was talking to some of the players there about. I think my instinct is that Ray aggression,
Mm-hmm.
Ray Red, is as about as strong as a deck can be in a magical Christmas land where you know what your opponent is playing. Like
Mm-hmm.
I tell you that I'm playing Ray aggression, you tell me what you're playing, and we build our decks accordingly. And I actually think in that magical hypothetical scenario, Ray elevates right up to tier A tier, S tier,
Mm-hmm.
where between blue and red heroism, you have so many answers. You have
Mm-hmm.
so many questions that you, whatever your opponent's deck's weak spot is, and you know this is kind of equivalent to dies to removal. Like if I can build
Right.
my deck around your deck, obviously I can win. But I feel like what's going to keep Ray maybe in the B tier, despite like the natural goodness of the leader and the card pool, is that it requires insane meta literacy, and
Mm-hmm.
that's my hypothesis why we're not seeing Ray on lists is because she is good. She's quite good. The
Mm-hmm.
decks are good. The problem is if you're expecting a lot of Boba and you build her for that and you run into Sabine, she's up there with like Palp and Vader Blue, where if you build the deck for the wrong meta, you're going to go 4-3, 5-2 at best, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know if that one's solvable, but man, looking at these Gen Con lists that are like, if we count Kira as a proxy set one leader, like these, you know, you would think Gen Con, I mean, it kind of matters. There's cool play mats. People are going to bring stuff, but there's also probably some people who are just showing up with whatever. And it's like 90% set one lists. And we're a month, pre-release was what, July 5th?
Yeah. Some.
That's a, you know,
Yeah.
that's a
That's a month.
30 days ago today.
Yeah.
So that's a month ago. We're a month into the meta, and nobody's confident. I mean, I'm not going to say nobody. Shout out to the one person running Hondo at Gen Con, but nobody's confident enough in new leaders to bring them to an event that's not even a huge event, and it makes me nervous for the PQs coming up because like if nobody dethrones Boba or Sabine, then we've doubled our leader pool, but we're essentially playing a very similar game to the game we played.
I mean, one other thing that I think is, I'm putting myself in the shoes of the designers, right? One of the things that you really want to be hesitant about in early set,
Aspirationally, yeah, don't let your
aspirationally.
dreams be dreams.
Okay. Okay. Fair. Fair. Yes. No. Fair. Fair. Um, One of the big challenges when you're building a TCG is that you want to make sure that new sets are relevant, but that there's not power creep. And especially when you're starting off, it's really hard to get the dials right so that you are um, you know, targeting in so that there's enough new exciting stuff that is new and exciting without it being so strong that it invalidates prior cards. And so I wonder if there's a certain amount of like caution in this set about trying to make sure that you're not introducing like very strong build around cards that will completely redefine the meta. And to kind of go back to the point where we talked about aggro and we talked about control, the thing that mid-range decks tend to gravitate towards is singular powerful units, right? Like units that when you play them, you are almost always happy. And I think that of the new units, Poe and Wrecker are index that can run them appearing an enormous amount because they are, mid-range to
Right.
aggro
Well,
threat. Yeah.
and I think that's the thing, though, right? Is that
Right.
like they did power creep. I mean, not the whole set, but there are
Right.
just better cards in set 2 for a given slot. But
Yeah.
really, what that is the card pool is small, and so more diversity means you're going to be able to answer specific questions
Right.
with some of the answers are going to come from set 2, right? But
Right.
like, I want my big beefy boys in set 1 in red heroism. Your option was Mace,
Mace.
right?
Mace. Yeah.
Who's
Good.
like,
Fine. Yeah.
I hope he's good in
Interesting in
set
certain
3.
states. Yeah.
But now we've got Poe and Wrecker, right? And they answer questions in a different way. They are different leaders or different units. I think my concern is that played out exactly as one would hope, right? That played out, I think, exactly as one would expect. You're seeing variations on ramp. You're seeing timely intervention removing ECL. Things are shifting. It's just the leaders who aren't shifting. The decks, the cards are. You're seeing plenty of shadows cards in Sparker Rebellion leader decks. That being said, one good news coming out of GenCon and is a good segue into our next segment. Tyler Parrott, I believe, was interviewed at GenCon and noted that in set 3, underlying aspect archetype assumptions will be shattered. My words, not his, but that will be upended. That will be the which I infer to mean that heroism aggression will not necessarily be the only aggro color, and that control vigilance or vigilance villainy will not be the only control, right? Like that there's whether is it green villainy that's the new control or yellow villainy that's the new control, or is it that like heroism and villainy switch or whatever, but that set 3 changes things, which brings us to our next segment. I have to I make allusions to my past life as a lawyer, but I'm going to dig deeper back as a high on my own farts liberal arts student, reading Nietzsche. The classic quotation of Nietzsche is about staring into the abyss. Is that careful lest when you stare into the abyss, because if you stare long enough, the abyss also stares into back into you. And last episode, dear listener, when we were kind of wrapping up the episode, Ned made a comment about, hey, we should do predictions of what we think good cards are. And I made a comment about us not pursuing traditional avenues of content creation. And when we were refining our topic list for tonight's episode, Ned said he wanted to talk about the new sets at Gen Con. They at the in-flight Fantasy Flight in-flight, that's what it was called, right? At their kind of annual Asmodee keynote, they announced just the names of 2025 sets, and Ned said, let's do some predictions. And we have clearly been staring into Star Wars Unlimited content creation for too long, because it has stared back into us. And I can't argue with it. We're doing it. But my admonition to Ned is I mostly want to approach this from a standpoint of game design. I will say that Ned has not seen all 11 Star Wars movies. I think that is a fair statement that I can make.
You're airing the dirty laundry here.
You have seen most of them.
Yes.
Arguably a vast majority, but not all. So we're at that. I don't want to approach this from a standpoint, and I think Ned would agree, of wouldn't this character be cool? I hope we see this character. I am purely interested in mechanical speculation, although my interest in IP and like meta, right? Like public perceptions of things means I want to talk about that a little bit. But so let's walk through some thoughts just so that we have it recorded, and then we can be right or wrong, draw our lines
So
in the sand.
Parker, just really
Yes.
quick. I want to do note that we are going to speculate about the existence of one character because that was confirmed on our podcast by Ryan Serrano that Dexter Jetster will be receiving a card in an upcoming set.
I think, Ned, that you got a CIA denial. I think Ryan was able to neither confirm nor deny.
I heard a strong confirm from Mr. Serrano that Dexter
I think
Jetster.
that was.
Yeah.
I think there was a laugh and a shore on a long enough timeline, right? Like I that felt like a Dumb and Dumber. You're telling me there's a
There's a
chance.
chance.
There's a chance. So there are 4 sets coming up, and I assume you've heard about them. But the first one, the one that's coming out in November, is Twilight of the Republic. We've known about this set for a while. We've already known that this set is a... Which one's top down and which one's bottom up? Which one when you start with theme?
So top down is when you start with theme. So to take like a brief digression here, when people talk about designing sets for card games, and this is, you know, a typology that was established by Mark Rosewater and may or may not be as accurate for SWU, but I still feel like it is a useful typology. You have 2 kinds of sets. You have bottom up sets and top down sets. A top down set is that you start with a thing that you're trying to convey. So an example of top down is like spooky gothic horror or like cowboys or Clone Wars, right? Where fundamentally you are designing the set around a particular reference point that is outside of the game, and that you are using that outside of the game reference point to guide your design of the set and the cards. And you're asking yourself when you are designing the set, does this feel like X? Does this feel like the Clone Wars? A bottom up set, in contrast, is a set where fundamentally the origin of the set is internal to the game's mechanics. So examples of bottom up sets are, let's do a set in about space. Let's do a set about
Well, wait. I want to pause there. So I hear
yeah,
you, right?
yeah.
So the idea
Like,
of, let's make a
yeah.
resources matter set, or let's make
Resources matter.
a
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
upgrades matter set,
Yeah.
or like, and we know that one day, it's been confirmed at this point, that one day there will be cards that have 2 non-morality aspects, that there will be
Right.
a vigilance aggression card, and so that's a mechanic driving
Yes.
factor. One of the interesting... So you got top... Okay, so bottom up is theme.
No, top down is theme. Top down is
theme, where you say, okay, here's the theme we want to go for.
Yeah.
And bottom up is we have a mechanic and we'll build on the mechanic to find.
Yeah,
the theme.
we have an idea, a mechanical idea that we want to refine and expand on.
What does face down cards mean?
Right.
What can we make them mean? So we also, so interestingly, I think there's a separate axis that they have confirmed that is at least true, at least for the first couple sets, I think through set 4, which is that set 1, the odd sets, and they use specifically the phrase odd sets and even sets, if I recall correctly. The odd sets are era based, and so that is a very specific flavor of theme, whereas the even numbered sets are conceptually themed. So set 2 is the underworld, is shadows,
Right.
Which makes sense in that, and I wonder how much of that is we're going to do smuggle and bounty, and that just kind of builds out from there. But then you end up with, acknowledgments that were, I believe it was Tyler who said we weren't going to wait till set 4 to have to the second year to have sequel characters. They have to show up sooner than that. So which of these 3 sets can we wedge them into? And so the thematic set of set 2. So we know set one, and we know set 3, Twilight, was
Mm-hmm.
a thematic era based set. That its
Era-based set. Yeah.
theme very specifically was the Clone Wars,
Yeah.
and what does that mean? Blah 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 blah. And now
Mm-hmm.
we know what that means. We know the two keywords, coordination, which feels very. I mean, both coordination and exploit feel like put lots of dudes on board set. Coordination
Yes.
meaning this is a trigger if you have 3 or more units on the board,
Mm-hmm.
do thing. Exploit is sack units to make big units cheaper or whatever. And so both of those are put lots of dudes on the map, which maps
Mm-hmm.
to the new tokens. We get 0 cost 1/1s for villainy and 0 cost 2/2s for heroism. All of the exploit we've seen is 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that means so exploits number is again for those who missed the discussion over the weekend is how you can sacrifice a unit to reduce the cost by 2. How many times are you allowed to do this? So that you can't
Mm-hmm.
sacrifice 4 units to make an 8 cost 0. There's a limit. An exploit is 2. The obvious minimum is 1. You can only
Mm-hmm.
you can't sacrifice fewer than 1 units to trigger exploit. What do you think the highest exploit number is that we see Ned in Twilight?
Um, 4.
Okay, so you think there's an exploit 4 in
I think that
Twilight?
there is likely to be an exploit for. So, to kind of go back to the galactic ambition discussion that we had nigh unto however many aeons ago, right? So, there was a discussion about galactic ambition. It seemed kind of weird. I think that when we talked to Ryan Serrano, he had some comment that like there is utility for it that they're planning going forward. Um, so I suspect that you might see some really powerful cards that are very high cost, and having that cost reducer is interesting because not only does it can you reduce it with exploit, but also having other ways to cheat it out might be useful. So I think that like reducing something by 8 seems good because I feel like in general getting above like 15 cost is dicey.
That almost, I
Yeah.
mean, an exploit 4, if it's priced
Yeah.
affordably, feels less like a you could cheat this out for cheaper and more like you can't play this unless you have n number of disposable units
Right.
on board. So okay,
That's my take though.
okay, I'll take max 4, exploit 4. I don't know if I have a feeling one way or the other. Um, but there's not much I think left to talk about Twilight mechanically.
I
Outstanding question. So but we know the
Yeah.
theme. It's Clone Wars.
Yep.
We know the 2 new keywords. Uh, we will see if there are any bounties or smuggles in Twilight. My wager is that there will be both. I have a strong wager that there is smuggle, and I'm willing to bet
Mm-hmm.
there'll be at least a couple bounty cards. Those don't require any tokens. They can
Mm-hmm.
kind of exist on their own. I don't know if I believe bounty is evergreen, but that's going to be weird. We don't have blocks. I don't know how
Mm-hmm.
games like Magic and everything that once you do away with blocks, how do you keep keywords relevant? That is a segment of its own.
Yes.
But so we, at that point, the remaining speculation, I think, for Twilight of the Republic is pure cool Star Wars. What cool characters do we hope make it? What characters from the deep cuts of Dave Filoni's like twisted imagination do we hope grace cards? Right, like that's what weird out of era cards do we hope to see? That we know that we got Count Dooku in set 1. Who do we hope shows up from wherever? That's not the Clone Wars in set 3. So it mostly, I think, boils down to cool Star Wars, which is not the speculation I want to do.
No.
But Ned, you sounds like you have thoughts about what we know about Twilight already.
I wanted to comment about Ahsoka as being a strictly better IG-88 with all the caveats around strictly that we commented on before, where Ahsoka has the ability to coordinate that it's if you control 3 or more units, she can tap and give a unit +1 on an attack. And that seems like a better version of IG-88's ability. Just saying.
I mean, you're not wrong, but it's a better unit of the hero ability.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it because it's on the hero villainy split, which I think is a line that, despite what prognosticators on Reddit think, is a line that probably won't be crossed I'm going to never say never, but I don't think they're working on set 9 right now, and I'm reasonably confident we won't see cards that are heroism and villainy for some time. Because a card that's heroism and villainy is functionally neutral. So like that line doesn't get crossed, I think. And if it doesn't get crossed, having a ability on one side that's similar to an ability on the other side of that divide seems inevitable, given that they're supposed to be putting out 16 leaders every set. You're going to have to I mean, we already see it kind of in a sense that like both Hondo and Tarkin give +1/+1 experience point tokens to people. Like, we're going to see more of that. But I also would like to note that, you know, everybody's been saying, I think, since they realize IG-88's not awesome, is that what he really needs is a way to be able to cheat out lots of units faster than your opponent. And if you can do that, then he becomes much better, right? That if you can be reliably dropping 2 to 3 units when your opponent's dropping 1, that damage adds up. And we're going to see that with the droids, right? We know what we need to see for IG-88 is the droids, is the ability to cheat out token units. And because Hera just gives herself Ahsoka gives herself +2/+0 when she's flips, whereas IG-88 gives everybody else +1/+0. So her like big board damage is 2, and his big board damage is how big is your board. And I think that's his reach. That's his finisher. If he can get out there with like tons of token 1/1s, like, I'm not saying he's going to be good, but I'm saying the tools are coming, and I've been saying that his tools were coming in set 3 to make him.
Yeah, no, and I think that's great. And I mean, like, this, to go back to the discussion that we had previously, one of the things that you are looking for in a new set is ways to make previously explored kills suddenly very different. Like, IG-88 in a universe with lots of tokens looks a lot better than previously. Moff Gideon in a universe where you have, huge amounts of poopers is a different thing. Palpatine, right? Like, right now, Palpatine is basically being run because he's a top-end control leader, and his activated ability is not being heavily leveraged.
But Palpatine with a lot of droids that he can sack to be able to reliably do that. I mean, to do that. One we had previewed that's you pay 3 and essentially generate 3 units for it.
Yeah.
That's a lot of palp sack.
Like, that is a lot of palp sack, right? Being able to look at older units and older leaders, older ideas, and rework them seems super interesting. Another example is older cards that are fun but maybe have not been great. Sneak Attack is a classic example of a card that is quite good, but it's never really found a home because it really is looking for units that have a good when played and a good when defeated ability, right? Because you want to be able to take advantage of both of those. And we don't have a lot of units where the when played in the when defeated are sufficiently good to justify kind of 2 for winning yourself.
But we might get there with all of the clone and droid sacrifice. So okay.
Yeah.
So and then the last prediction is that, not less a prediction, but we've been indicated that new archetypes will be explored. Yada yada yada. But I think I'm willing to say on the internet that my wife and daughter, their birthdays are in early March, and knowing that we're going to have pre-release weekends in early March in perpetuity is a rough scene in my household. So speaking of early March, Jump to Lightspeed will be set number 4. This one feels like a layup, Ned, but what are your predictions for Jump to Lightspeed?
So, I mean, let's start off by laying out this is an even set, so it's not era defined. Jump to Lightspeed feels very spacey. My hot take, which I feel like is shared by a good 90% of the Star Wars affiliated internet, is leaders that are space leaders. Because every leader that we have seen up until this point has been a ground leader, and there is no mechanical reason why you could not have a space leader. You also have a bunch of cards that have been seeded for making space more relevant. Our preview card, Swoop Down, I think the what the 4-cost yellow 3/4 space unit that can attack the ground.
Oh, the gunship.
Gunship, yeah. Swooping gunship, whatever its name is. Yeah.
Strafing gunship.
Strafing gunship. There we go. Yeah,
Yep.
Strafing Gunship has been a card that I have tried to get to work because I really like the conceit of it. But
if you want to work on something, Ned, I'd love for you to cook with a swoop down and the what is it, Architens assault carrier, the one that converts defeated units into resources. Why wait for your opponents to have resources in space when you can murder them on the ground? But okay, so I agree. I think more space stuff feels obvious. My prediction for Jump to Lightspeed, I look at recurring magic mechanics, because I know at least Tyler, I mean, on the one hand, it's you can't ignore it, right? Like it's got 30 years of design
extremely
history.
checkered history. Relatively checkered design history.
There's a lot of lessons to learn, but also so Tyler Parrott is, I know, like regularly tweets about Magic, so I know like he's still neck deep in it. I feel like Jump to Lightspeed, like there's I don't want to go so far as to say a mechanic, but like a keyword, but in my mind, the ability to like delay of like not bounce, but just like remove from play, remove from play until the end of the turn, so that you're like, you know what, you're about to murder this thing, I'd like it to be there next turn, like for whatever reason.
Like a protective custody kind of like a capture equivalent,
right?
That's like protective custody, but like it phases out, to use like Magic terminology.
Exactly, this is what I'm thinking. It's just like it's removed from play until the end of the turn. That feels like a mechanic that I think that one feels reasonably obvious. It's play around in the space arena, and the most obvious play that people have been asking for since set 1, shout out to his dudeness, is, that's not a title, that's the username, is leaders who deploy to space. So I think that one seems pretty obvious. Legends of the Force, coming about a year from now in July.
Era set. This is an era set because it's an even set.
I don't know how long that pattern goes out. I don't think they promised that pattern would be forever. It seemed to allude like through set 4 is my memory. So maybe this is an era set, maybe not. I'm going to go with the obvious one. I don't have a stake. I find this one interesting because I don't have, like, the obvious question is does this allude to Legends, the Disney sanctioned name for out of canon materials? Are a whole lot of hot and sweaty nerds about to get their imaginary high school girlfriend Mara Jade back? Like,
no, there's no way. There is absolutely zero possibility that they're including Mara Jade in the
On the one hand, obvious, right? Like Disney, that doesn't like. There's a lot of people who are about to get really disappointed. That seems like the obvious answer. Arguments against, or arguments in favor of this being a Legend set, and I don't know. The two chief arguments: one, Legends is such a loaded term in Star Wars. Like, it's literally the name of the largest body of Star Wars material that has been applied to mean it doesn't count anymore. Like, that's what, if you say Star Wars Legends to anybody who is sufficiently sniffing Star Wars up their nose, which is like every other content creator except for you, Ned, like, Legends means all these characters who've been nuked from orbit by Disney. And that's like that's such a loaded term, right? So on the one hand, it seems obvious that they're never going to do that. But you take the word unlimited and the fact that they were cagey early on, like, we could do anything. Like, I am 89% confident. I recall them acknowledging the license covers all Star Wars, right? Like, unlimited is everything. But just because the license says yes, you can, doesn't mean, there's licensing approvals. We've seen with Disney that, like, with Marvel Champions and so forth, that they push in certain directions. But it's a loaded term, and FFG, even old FFG, forget new FFG, even old FFG could not be unaware, like, in terms of obliviousness, could not be unaware of how much that word means. And so to slap that word on a set, right, that you're like, that's a dog whistle for Star Wars nerds, right? Argument 2, Disney has started rolling out for the anniversary, like, bound volumes, editions, new print runs with new covers of Legends books, like reprinting Legends books. So clearly Legends is not entirely anathema, like, it's not entirely toxic as far as Disney is concerned. I don't think so, because, like, there's so much new content coming out, right? You've got, like, all these new shows. They said they're doing aggressive playtesting on set 6, having conversations about set 9. So that means they're designing 15 months in advance of reality, like, in terms of playtesting. That means they had to have, what was out a year and a half ago? We had pretty much everything except for Bad Batch Season 3 and The Acolyte. These are shows, Ned.
No. I know about The Acolyte. Listen. I have heard about The Acolyte.
So, like, pretty much all of Star Wars. I mean, at that point, you've got Andor, right? Like, was out, and a lot of good stuff there. So, like, there's a ton of stuff that Disney might want them to do. Like, so I don't think they're going to revisit, but it's not unaware. So that's why I think there's, like, it's not just, like, I think a lot of people who want Mara Jade to come back are going to be disappointed, but I think the people who dismiss it out of hand without evaluating, like, the factors, like, they might get their comeuppance too.
I am prepared to have my uppance come.
But here's my mechanical pitch, Ned. My mechanical hot take.
Yeah.
Again, we know at least one of the Sudes is a huge historical Magic fan, narrative Magic fan.
Yes.
We know two aspect cards are coming. Legends, for those who don't know, is the set where 2-color Magic cards were introduced.
Yes.
And that feels like too on the nose. That feels even less likely. That feels even less likely than actually getting, like, Legends characters, but because it's like an allusion to somebody else's game. But as soon as I saw that, I was like, again, that's a loaded word. That was what, for people of a certain age, what multicolored cards are. So that's my call. I'm probably wrong, but I'm drawing my line in the sand. Spicy take, set 5, Legends of the Force is when we see multicolored cards.
My hot mechanical take on this is I think that there is very likely to be a Force Ghost mechanic. I feel like that is one of the, if we look mechanically at Force cards, right, like cards that need a Force user, one of the biggest challenges about these cards is that they require you to have a unit that survives on the board, right? And in order to turn them on. And so a Force Ghost mechanic, number one, in addition to being thematic, and you get, like, Obi-Wan, etc., all hanging out at the end when the Ewoks are singing Yub Nub, but you also have the mechanical ability to overcome that, right? Like, just because somebody removes your Obi-Wan, you still have a shot at playing, like, probably they won't stick around forever. It's probably going to be like a one turn thing, but like when they would die, flip them or turn
or
them,
something, right?
twist them turn wise, whatever. Yeah, but they're
Put a
still
Force
off.
Ghost token into
Yeah,
play,
yeah,
like yeah.
right. But they're still in play, and you still get to play your force cards, and you still get to do things. And I think that that solves a lot of problems for force heavy decks. Also, more
Okay,
lightsabers. Obviously,
so
just
that
more, and 500 lightsabers. Lightsabers coming out of people's ears.
yeah. See, and I'm wondering if it's going to be set. It doesn't seem like it'll be
Yeah.
set 4 jump to light speed, but I'm wondering if it's set 3 or set 5, where we know at some point Force cannot continue to be blue red only. That like
Yes.
not counting Ezra, who's out there by himself, but
No,
like
not. There's also the double green Jedi guy from
oh yeah,
set
who
one.
again
Yeah.
from Clone Wars, who will now be relevant when you have a million token units, right?
Oh
Like
yeah. Yeah.
Krell's
Krell,
chance to
General Krell.
shine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like yeah, I can see you just like dropping him with like 8 clone troopers and just being like
Oh
vomiting
boy,
forth,
that's some way to kill yourself with drawing out your deck. But
drawing out. Yeah,
like that's the noble way to die.
yeah, but for the most part, it's in 2 colors. But that can't
Yeah.
be like like to the extent that Swoo has a color council. It can't be that like red villainy and blue heroism get 90% of the force cards. That's
Why
just where we're at
not?
now.
Why not?
I
Why
don't buy it.
shouldn't
I
they
don't buy it.
have it? It's their
So
birthday.
yeah, right. So Legends of the Force. Any other predictions, mechanical predictions, Ned? Before I die.
Yoda leader.
Oh,
Yoda
so you're
or
just gonna go
Obi-Wan
with
leader.
cool,
Yeah.
cool dude cards. I think
Cool
we get
dude
those
card.
in Twilight, dude.
Oh, you
Like,
think? Oh yeah. No, I forgot about Yoda fighting Count Dooku. Yeah. No.
yeah, he does
Yeah.
all the weird
Yeah.
flipping, and he's hanging out in
Yeah.
that like assault
Yeah.
gunship,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah.
no,
And
we'll
he's like
get him
yelling at
in.
the clone troopers to get in the chopper. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Set
Yeah.
3 feels reasonably obvious that
Yeah.
he's in charge of he's the head of the council. Like, how does he not? All right, now secrets and power. We know
Oh boy.
we actually have one detail about this one.
Oh, we do. Okay.
Weirdly enough, this is a set. My understanding is Tyler led this set, and he tweeted essentially that it's weird.
Weird.
Let me grab his actual
The
tweet.
words. Yes.
Yeah. So
his
he, yeah, his. I'm not. No, Ned. I'm not going to do that. Let me scroll through all of his weird. I don't think you guys can fathom how excited I am for Secrets of Power, says Tyler. It's my passion project. I pitched a specific vision and was given the opportunity to lead design a set that captures that feeling of, well, that'd be a spoiler. So, like, there's something here, like Secrets and Power, or Secrets of Power rather, is something that like Tyler felt the need to actually have to pitch a very specific vision.
I have a brainwave, and this is goofy and this is wild. All right. So one thing I know about Mr. Parrot is that the gentleman loves himself a cube. The
He
gentleman
does love himself a
loves
cube.
a cube. A
Did I tell you about his sticker cube idea?
Yes.
I actually have
Yeah.
a Google Doc of a Star Wars Unlimited sticker cube. So because it's such a great idea. Anyways, so he loves himself a cube.
Gentleman loves himself a cube. A mechanical idea that has come up kind of like time and time again in Magic and has never been implemented, but like for people who are Magic adjacent, this is like in the water, is cards that begin the game outside your deck and you get them by like completing some kind of an action, right? And if you incorporate like one of the defining features of Cube is that you are selecting from to revisit Cube. Cube is a limited environment where you typically have one copy of each card, and rather than it being like the standard pack distribution, you're building pseudo packs out of a whole bunch of powerful cards. So essentially, you get to play the greatest hits and build like fun stuff in a curated environment. The person who has the cube builds it, and they shape it to be however they want. There's cubes of variety of parallels, yada yada yada. Sorry, we're having to recover this ground. I just don't want people to be lost. But like one of the joys about cube drafting is you look at you fan out the pack that you get, and there's all of these beautiful, powerful cards, and you can only pick one, right? Like you only get one, but the card you get is it's gas. So, the secrets of power, I could see, if, again,
An all
incredibly
gas, no
speculative.
brakes set.
No. So it's the cards start outside of the game, right? Like you have a set of like seven or like 10 cards, whatever. You put them in your sideboard. I don't know, and like some condition triggers, and you get to look through some number and pick one, and they're all good, but like you just get one.
Okay, so like, okay,
Yeah,
interesting
sort of like a
enough.
market mechanic, but like
Yeah, yeah.
market is like cards that could start inside of your deck. This is specifically powerful cards that start outside of your deck, but that you, by accomplishing some action, you get to take them, but you're getting like one or
You keep
like
saying by
a subset.
accomplishing some action, Ned. Another thing we know about Tyler Parrott, we are talking about
Yes.
him way too much on this episode, is that he is also a big Lord of the Rings LCG fan. He actually
Oh.
got his what I guess FFG employees at 5 years get to be illustrated and to go into the body of art. And his is he's an elf. Like he's some Lord of the Rings elf. That's why, if I recall his tweets correctly. And so you keep saying a thing that you must accomplish, an action that you must accomplish. It sounds suspiciously like a quest of some kind.
Yes.
I have no idea what Secrets of Power could be. Like Secrets of Power could be. The other option is like in my mind at some point. Everybody's like, "What is Star Wars about?" And it's like lightsabers and force users doing cool tricks and spaceships going wee 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 pew pew pew, and like you that's what Star Wars is ostensibly about. It's based on pulp, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
based on Japanese samurai cinema and pulp
Yep.
comics. But that's not what George Lucas thinks it's about. If you ask George Lucas in his opening scrawls, it's always about politics and trade
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah.
like
Trade
I
negotiations. Yeah,
I
yeah.
have any thing I can say to set up this cool galaxy. Nobody's been watching these movies in 20 years. I'm coming out with episode 1. I'm going to talk about tariffs. Right? Like that's what George Lucas thinks Star Wars is about. So counterpoint, I wonder the extent to which Secrets of Power is like my
Oh,
immediate hot take was instead of the monarch, it's the Senate. So you get to play a card and say, "I am the
oh,
Senate," right? Like or
that's
whatever. Like
very clever. That is
so,
super
there's
clever.
and lean into right. Like lean into Twin Sons. Really go heavy on cards. Let people. Again, this is wild speculation, but Secrets of Power, like just to me, my immediate reaction is like at some point like I looking back on the history of Magic, you have a game that's ostensibly about two wizards summoning monsters to throw at each other to murder each other. Yet
Yeah.
inevitably they try to ratchet in some theme where it's like actually it's about two people getting married, or like actually in this set we're going to do it. It's all about like secret politics and spies and mysteries and blah blah blah. And it's like, I mean, sure, go ham, but Star Wars, you do Star Wars thematically long enough, and you've got to do backroom negotiation politicking. Even the Clone Wars reliably does episodes where it's like Jar Jar, Padme gets sick, so Jar Jar has to negotiate this peace treaty. Shenanigans ensue. Like that's like 1 in 10 episodes of Clone Wars. Everybody's always like, "Oh, it's so good," and then it's like, but do you remember those episodes where Jar Jar has to do things? Like they're not always good. So that's my take. Is I'm
Gungan
willing.
typo in set 3, obviously. Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see. I mean, I am very curious to know if Gungan is a type, right? Is a
Yeah.
trait. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, are there Gungans we care about other than
Boss Nass.
Boss? What's his Boss
Yeah,
Nass and
Boss Nass, and then there's the like Jar, and then there's Roy Binks, Jar Jar's father, who famously attempts to end his own life in a comic done by Tony Millionaire, I believe.
I have no idea what this is. But,
George, no,
okay.
this is great. This is great. It's beautiful. It's really poignant.
I believe it.
George
Is it
R.
canon,
Binks.
Ned? Is it canon? So we've got like two. So I'm gonna say no Gungan typal. Maybe Naboo typal. Maybe Naboo typal.
George R. Binks.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
So pretty weak hypotheticals on segments of power, except for secrets of power, except for
no. I thought your
probably
hypothetical
secrets
was pretty
and
cool.
maybe power.
Yeah. It's a Rings of Power crossover set, given Mr. Parrott's love of Lord of the Rings and Jeff Bezos's deep wallets.
I was going to say, or just like Disney's all desire to consume all by. We might get there by like
put their desire for their lust for power into an object, a ring of power.
All right, dear listener, that is all she wrote. This was episode 20 of The Force Unlimited. We're recording on August 4th, 2024. Dear God, it's almost August 5th. If you have any thoughts about the episode, as always, please email us at theforceunlimited@gmail.com. Do you have any final thoughts, Ned?
Tyler Parrott is welcome to come on the show at any point to discuss his love of politics, galactic politics.
And Lord of the Rings, you just want to have him on and then true to our brand, only talk about the LCG.
Yeah, we could also do like a Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire book club. Have you seen that book? It's like a rise and fall of it's like a political history of Star Wars, like a Watsonian perspective written from the point of view of like a historian in the New Republic era writing about the rise, equivalent to Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, but for Star Wars.
I could not care less.
What do you do?
That's it. With that, dear listener, we will see you in a few weeks.